Good morning, Mount Diablo Unitarian Universalist Church. Oh, you're a lively bunch. It is with great joy that I get to join you this year as your intern minister. I've had a very enjoyable 2 weeks. I already know some of the faces in this room, and it is wonderful to see you again. And I'm looking forward to what this coming year will bring. So, as this is my first sermon with you, I was asked to speak on something that would introduce myself to the congregation. Now, while I was tempted to speak on musical theater, or one of my geekier interests, such as the cartoon Steven Universe, and believe me, you may yet hear something in a sermon about one of those things. While I was tempted to speak on something like that, I chose instead to start with what brought me here, both generally to ministry and this church specifically. Social justice. I'll start with a story I've come to tell at UU congregations when I know I'll be working with them for a while. The story of how I first came to feel at home in a UU church. I encourage people to revisit their own story of feeling at home for the first time in a UU church. It's an opportunity to revisit why Unitarian Universalism ignited, soothed, or spoke to something within us. So, picture it. Summer 2001, Springfield, Missouri. A fairly conservative city in the middle of the Bible Belt. I was working on my bachelor's degree in music education, and I was in a closet about a little thing known as gay. I'm sure you've heard of this thing. Out here in the Bay Area, it does not seem to be much of a big deal. But I was in a somewhat smaller town in the Midwest. It's the third largest city in Missouri, but it's still a small town at heart. Anyway, I'd come out to a few close friends. That had worked out okay, but many of the friends and the family had not worked out so well, so I put that process on hold. However, that summer, I decided I needed to find supportive community. So I hunted up a little group called PFLAG, Parents and Friends of Lesbians and Gays, and they just happened to be meeting at the UU church in town. My thought was I could just be a friend of somebody gay for a while until I was comfortable. Well, anyway, I went to that UU church, I picked up some pamphlets, and I went to the church the next Sunday. And I never really left. It's been about 15 years, 14, 15. So 7 months later, still hadn't come out to anybody, still worried about it, and the congregation had decided to do the Welcoming Congregation curriculum. Many of you might know this is a curriculum about LGBTQ identity and issues, and it's created for UU churches that want to be more welcoming. So they decided to do this curriculum, and they were having a discussion about it, and I had something to say that was important. I don't remember what it was, but I had to come out. I had to come out for it to make any sense. So I gathered my courage, and I told the assembled congregants that I was gay, gave my comment, and they nodded their heads and said, oh, good point, and went on with the conversation. It wasn't an issue. I wasn't a freak. They said they were welcoming, and I realized that they really lived that. They lived what they said. I felt I had found a community that aspired to welcome all in Unitarian Universalism, but especially those who most needed love, those who were judged by society and seen as lacking. It was a church that tried to live out the belief that when you love your neighbor, you have to remember that everyone is your neighbor. That was the first step toward ministry. I didn't realize it then. The next step was teaching elementary school music in an impoverished school district in Kansas City, Missouri, and year after year, witnessing the effects of generational poverty on the education of the students. how the inability of their families to get financially on their feet, usually through no fault of those families, kept those children in schools that, despite quality teachers, were underfunded and therefore understaffed and lacking appropriate resources. Student after student after student would get less education than youth in more affluent districts because of complex systems in place in our society. Systems like public school funding, which often leads to the underfunding of impoverished schools, often with mostly black and brown students. Or destructive behaviors that we take on as members of the society, like blaming the students, just the students, because obviously they can't learn or don't want to. Or just blaming parents and saying they don't care. Or just saying, oh, teachers don't know how to teach. And missing that it is really a much larger, more complex picture than any piece. So I thought, what could I really do with these larger issues? Started facilitating large groups of high school students on topics such as racism, sexism, and homophobia. And the point of these groups wasn't as much to teach the high school students, but rather to get them to share their diverse experiences with one another. To help them educate each other on what life was actually like for them. Not some hypothetical people, but the actual people that they cared about, the actual friends that they had in the room. For this work, we went through extensive training, seeing oppressive systems around and within ourselves. And then we talked with these students, and they often taught us realities of difficult lives that they were experiencing, or sometimes the reality that they had never experienced the difficulties they heard about. These experiences led to Unitarian Universalist ministry. This desire to engage people in caring more fully and more deeply for the world around them. But why in church? Why not politics? Why not social work? Why not any number of other places in life where one can work on social justice? You may have asked yourself this question if you have come here and social justice has felt really important to you, and I hope on some level it has felt important to everybody. And this was a question my church at the time was asking about its general purpose in the world. What makes us a church rather than a social group? Both come together and care for the people in their midst, but with no creed or no God that necessarily holds us together. What makes our work and our gathering religious? Now, of course, being social is one wonderful thing that churches offer. The opportunity to come together, the opportunity to care together, to hold each other. But we're more than just that. So this is a good question for a church to ask about any aspect of their life. And I found myself asking, what's the importance of religion in social justice work? I'm going to admit I was unsure of what my answer would be for quite a while. And I think this happens for some of us who really like to chew on a question. I'm sure there's some of you out there who really like to chew on a question for a while. So after some good hard chewing and some good hard reading, I found this is one piece of what I have found. As religious people, we have a deeper commitment to social justice than just doing what's right or what's good. We are called to be a loving presence in this world. I think philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy, his writing helped firm this idea up for me. In his work, there's a commitment, an implicit commitment to social justice in the way he describes God. Now, whether or not you believe in God, pardon me, I myself firmly sometimes believe in God. Firmly and sometimes. But whether or not you believe in God, just hang in there with me for a minute. I'm going to tell you how Nancy sees the idea, and you're not going to be required to believe or not believe later. That will be up to you. Now, Nancy says God, or the divine, or the celestial, is the name for the fact that I am in relation not with something, but with the fact that I am not limited to all those relations I have with all the things of the world or even with all the beings of the world. It suggests that there is something else, which I will here call the opening. Something that makes us be, as humans, open to something more than being in the world. Nancy goes on to say that it's more than just the things we do, though those are important. We can see the opening in feelings like joy and sadness that go beyond our own being, connecting to something larger, something immense, something infinite. And I believe that we are called as UUs to feel a responsibility to that, as Nancy calls it, that opening, that infinite relational energy between all things and all people and all beings. And it brings from us so many loving and grounded actions. It brings your participation in winter nights, housing people who need a place to stay. It brought my work with street ministry, with San Francisco Night Ministry this summer. You're bringing it when you bring food for the food project, when you work on legislation that helps people be treated as fully human, when you protest in solidarity with Black Lives Matter or with the Standing Rock Sioux tribe in opposing the Dakota Access Pipeline. That church back in Springfield, Missouri was relating to it when they did what they said they believed in and affirmed people. And even when we are silent and listening to somebody when they need time and space to share their struggles, or when we realize that we could do better in our own work and we ask ourselves the difficult questions about how can we grow and be more loving, even then we're doing that work of connecting, of relating back to that great responsibility to care for the people and the planet. What's the most beautiful part of this commitment isn't just that we're so connected, but that we are connected regardless of how difficult the times may be. I loved Mr. Barb's story this morning of the Jewish community that just kept gathering to heal the world, no matter the challenges. I imagine that group at the beginning of the story being present and engaged in justice work in their community, but there were struggles. The world became more challenging or terrifying. I am sure that many in that group were hopeless or felt sad sometimes. They had trouble paying their bills. They were unsure if their attempts to love the world were working at all. And I am sure those of us here are familiar with some of those struggles too. But they did what they could. They still gathered with their commitment to heal the world. And they did what they were capable of in that moment. They would search for and find that connected, hopeful space and continue their mission. This is the spirit of Unitarian Universalism that I love. And I am excited to see it at work in this congregation this year. I can't wait to see you engage this world and this community, bringing your gifts and your deep commitment to love this world we are a part of. And if you are a person who has waited to share your energy and your spirit with this congregation, maybe you've been busy. Maybe you've just been afraid that you don't have anything to share. But maybe today you are ready. You could visit the social justice table in Borton Hall, hint, hint. I've had the opportunity to meet with some of the people who are part of those groups in the past couple weeks, and it has been wonderful, and I'm looking forward to the work they do this year. If you feel you need to get more grounded, visit our Vesper service on Thursday, or other meditation activities. There are plenty, and they have been wonderful that I've seen in the past couple weeks. And whatever you do, though, I would ask you this year, look at where you are right now and see what is that next step forward. Whatever that next step forward is for you, I encourage you to take it. Because that is how we can enrich and deepen that bond to each other, to people throughout the world and the world itself. When you add your energy to it, it becomes more loving and more whole. And I look forward to this coming year as we grow in compassion and our care for this world. Amen and blessed be.